Hating California, super hot right now. Look, I've lived in not only California, but LA my entire life. I feel like a lot of times when you hear people say like, California is in shambles, it's the worst place in all of America, nobody move there. Don't go there. Don't even think about California. You will turn homeless. Look, folks, I get it. California hates. It's fun. It's fun to hate on California. It really is. It's more than a meme. It's like it is an actual reality for pretty much everybody that doesn't live in California, especially LA. I feel like a lot of times you hear someone say like California is in shambles. They really mean LA is in shambles. You think of California, what's the first place you think of? Probably LA, maybe San Fran, maybe San Diego, San Bernardino. I don't know. It's like most people are thinking of LA, right? They use the word California as a describer for how much LA and San Francisco suck. Everything else kind of is like in that bubble, right? Here's the thing. I've lived in LA my entire life, right? And I can kind of remember what it was like when I was a kid. I was born in 93, so I started remembering how things were around me outside around like 2000-ish, 2000 to 2006, glory days, right? We had Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Metal Gear Solid 4, World of Warcraft. Something I'm really thankful I never played once because it probably would have completely changed the trajectory of my life if I ever even got into that game. But I have a little bit of a unique perspective on the whole what's going on and what's wrong with LA and California thing, because not only have I been outside riding my bike, a BMX bike, in the street since I was like 12. I did it almost all the time because I was homeschooled. So right after middle school, I was homeschooled. So I was riding my bike every single day. I was homeschooled because my parents were both busy as hell. They just like didn't really care about what I was doing at all. So I was like, yo, can I be homeschooled? And they're like, yeah, sure. Like we don't have to actually do any teaching, right? My parents never taught me anything. I think a misconception people have about homeschooling is that your parents are teaching you. Maybe that's how it works in some places, but for me, it was just kind of like an excuse to go do whatever you want as a teenager. And then you had to report to this place once a week. And, that's how you got like a high school diploma. Anyways, long story short, I've been out riding my bike everywhere. So I've seen the change in how things are outside in LA. I'm talking about like I was 14 years old, getting my bike, taking the Blue Line train station from Long Beach to downtown LA, which takes you through some of the worst parts of LA, straight through the heart of Compton, through Watts, through parts of South Central, and then straight up into downtown LA, which back in the 2000s, between 2000 and 2010, in between those years, downtown LA was not a place you wanted to live. It was nothing like how it is now, right? It was like it was just like a weird zombie land. It wasn't quite like as bad as it is now, which is funny to say because no one really thought about living there. You could get like a super big, nice penthouse, which now would go for like $6,000 a month for probably like, I don't know, like $1,300. You just didn't move there, right? It was like moving to an industrial district and getting a nice apartment. So it was kind of like a weird thing. Anyways, I'm saying all that to say that I have seen LA change in a way that is strange because everything gets more expensive. It's getting more packed. There's more homeless people everywhere, like everywhere. And it's still not that bad. If I'm being 100% honest, I still think it's kind of fine. As someone who's lived here my whole life, and I've traveled around a lot. I've been to Tokyo. I've been all over the United States. When I was a BMX rider, I traveled pretty much everywhere. So I've been to almost every state, I think, except for like a few up in the top left. Like I've never been to Boise, Idaho. I've been to Michigan, been to Texas, been to Louisiana, been to Massachusetts, New York, Miami, been all over the place. So I got a decent perspective on like what it's like to be somewhere else and to live here in LA. Anyways, I'm saying all that to say, it seems like there's a little bit of a hype around just dunking on California and especially LA lately. But, maybe it's not unjust. But with all that said, I want to watch this video from this guy. He looks very smart, all right? He looks smart. So that's why I picked this video to watch. His name's Patrick Boyle, and he seems intelligent, right? He's got glasses, tie, in an office. I'm in a garage turned into a studio, and I just shaved for this video. So clear difference. He's probably a lot smarter than I am, but I know a couple things. I want to see what his ideas about California are compared to mine. That's the point of today's video. Check it out. Patrick Boyle, what went wrong with California?
The largest economy in the United States, with a gross state product of over $4 trillion. If it was its own country, it would have the world's fifth largest economy, behind Japan and ahead of India.
Yep.
California is home to some of the world's most valuable technology companies. It's the center of the global entertainment industry, and its farms are amongst the most productive in the world, growing over half of America's vegetables, fruits, and nuts. California's workers are hugely productive too. The state has a GDP per capita of $104,000, which would rank it as number 6 in the world if it was a country.
Okay.
Tax havens, which California definitely is not, often have distorted GDP, as multinational companies frequently transfer intellectual property assets to tax havens like Ireland, which get counted as that country's GDP. Income on foreign-owned capital held in tax havens also gets counted as GDP because the income originates in that country, even if the financial firm has nothing but a PO box to show for it. If we exclude tax havens from the list to remove these distortions, California really stands out as the most productive place in the world.
Let's go.
Unfortunately, some of the shine has started to come off the Golden State in recent years as companies and workers have been leaving.
Okay.
Elon Musk famously announced this summer that he would move the headquarters of his...
So I feel like this is probably a video that's more about the economic state of California and, reasons why big companies are leaving and disagreements in politics and maybe some certain laws, stuff like that. I think this is a much smarter video than I thought I was going to be clicking on. So let's see where it goes. That's a crazy picture.
To Texas.
That's an insane photo.
He has long complained about over-regulation and excessive taxation in California.
True.
But said
taxes in California are they're excessive. They feel painful. When I was earning not that much money, it was like, man, they're taking a lot of it. Like $60K is now, as crazy as it sounds, living in LA on $60K is like going to be very difficult, which I feel like in a lot of other places, that is a easily solid income, maybe even enough to support a family in some places. Just that income, if I'm not mistaken, like if you're really frugal, you can make it happen. Right? If you live somewhere where, like, let's say you have a family of 4, husband, wife, son, daughter, or like just 2 kids, you pay rent, maybe your rent's $1,500. As long as you don't have a car payment, I will talk about this till the end of time. A car payment will ruin just about anybody, because that's the thing that's like, it doesn't matter if you're in like Louisiana or New York City. You could have the same apartment, right? That's in Louisiana, New York City. It could be like $800 in the South or like $3,000 in New York. But a car payment is going to be $700 no matter where you are, and it's the same car, right? And that car is the same car that could like drive you the same way like a 90s or 2000s Toyota could, right? I don't think that you should go like crazy on buying a cheap used car and get something that's so old that you're constantly working on it and it like forces you to learn how to work on cars if you're not a person who wants to learn how to work on cars. But at the same time, the obsession with buying super expensive vehicles and financing them is a problem that leans to not being able to afford the necessities of life, because like a lot of people see an expensive car, nice cars as a status thing that they need to have, right? That was my problem too. When I got my first nice job, the first thing I did was buy a nice car and I was financing it. And if like after I was paying taxes, I was like, wow, I have nothing left. But if I didn't have this car payment plus this insane insurance, I'd have like an extra $1,000, which goes a long way when you're not making that much.
That the final straw was a new law relating to parental rights. Critics argued that Musk was attacking the state after years of benefiting from its abundant government support, which was of course paid for by the high taxes. The president of the California Labor Federation told the LA Times that California, through tax credits, electric vehicle subsidies, and training grants, made Elon successful. It's not just Elon Musk, however. Companies like Chevron, Hewlett-Packard, Palantir, and Charles Schwab have all left the state in recent years. According to the Financial Times, over 200 companies have left California since 2019, with very few companies moving there to replace them. This contrasts with state...
People are leaving California a lot. They're also leaving New York, Illinois, and they're going to Florida and Texas. Now, let me know if you personally know anyone who's fled any of these places to go to Florida or Texas. I have. Right after COVID, 2 of my best friends left to Florida. And I know a family who went to Texas, and I don't know if they're really like enjoying it that much. I feel like Texas, this also goes for Florida too. Well, I mean, this goes for anywhere, right? The more money you have, the more you're going to enjoy a move. I feel like if you're moving and you're not like making a bunch of money, you're not really going to enjoy it when you relocate fully. A lot of the reasons why it's like a family that's making like, under 100K a year and you're feeding at least 2 kids, and that's combined, like 2 incomes. So maybe one person's making 60K, the other person's making 40K. If you're not able to make it in California off of that much, then you're leaving because you can't afford things, right? And whether or not, I think me personally, I think if you're a family earning 6 figures and you are having a problem affording things, then there is a significant spending problem somewhere in the balance sheet, right? Somewhere someone's spending too much. Figure out where that is. I think if you're more eager to make things work, you probably could anyways. If you want to leave, you want to leave. If you go to Florida, I think that a lot of people who just got up and went to Florida or Texas were probably like, wow, there's a lot of things I miss about like California, namely the weather. You get good weather in Florida, but then like when it's bad, it's miserable. When it's like 90 degrees and like that moggy humidity just weighs you down, you don't really want to do much. And in Texas, it gets really hot and really cold. So, you know, I mean, I like both these places. I love Florida. I love Texas. Fun to visit. If I had to pick one that I would live in personally, it'd probably be Florida, just because I already live like like every weekend I go to the beach out here. Something that no one really even does in LA. Like that's like the main draw coming out here is being able to go to the beach all the time. Something nobody ever even does, but I do it all the time. So I guess it'd be Florida. I guess probably go to the Gulf of America in Texas too. But so this is interesting. People are leaving California and New York. It looks like they're mainly going to Florida and Texas.
Like Texas and Florida, where the exact opposite is happening.
People are staying in those two
places.
places.
This isn't all that new either. Research from the Hoover Institution shows that this trend began well before the pandemic either.
People are leaving California in unprecedented numbers.
From the Hoover Institution shows that this trend began well before the pandemic and has been slowly picking up pace.
Actually,
they point out that corporate relocation before the pandemic
doubled in the
and has
year
been slowly
after the
picking
pandemic.
up
That's when
pace.
people were just like,
they point out that corporate relocation planning takes years, giving the example of the NHRA, who left California in 2021 after a 12-year study. According to Joseph Politano at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the biggest beneficiaries of the post-pandemic move have been states like Texas and Florida, whose economic growth has outstripped most American
markets. It makes sense.
If
you're like, if anyone lives somewhere nice, if you're thinking about, here's the three main places anyone wants to live: Los Angeles, Miami, New York City, right? And USA. I think those are the big three, like, cool places that people want to go. Then you have Austin, Texas, Salt Lake City, maybe. I don't know. I really can't even think of any other like places that people would really want to go.
With huge jobs growth,
and
too.
We're talking about businesses,
now, it's
not
worth
necessarily
noting
people either,
that despite all of this negativity,
California
has been growing faster than the United States overall. And the United States has experienced great economic growth in recent years. But as Texas and Florida have grown, so have jobs. But in California, there's been economic growth paired with very weak jobs growth, which is a problem. The U.S. unemployment rate sits at 4.1%.
Dang, look at that spike in COVID, dude. Look at that right there. 15%. Everyone was just chilling at home, getting that $800 check, playing Warzone, dying off spawn, just getting DoorDash, even though they could not afford it. I make okay money. I still don't think I could afford food delivery. I can't tell you the last time I got food delivered. It's expensive, man. I just can't ever justify the cost, especially like I love going to a fast food place and like having the whole meal be under like $5. You know, I got all the apps. Like I got the Taco Bell app. I got the McDonald's app if I ever go there, which is extremely rarely, thankfully. But McDonald's app is very good at getting you a cheap meal if you just need to eat. You can get like 2 McDoubles for like $3.50 or something like that. So what was I even talking about? I don't know.
Far off its
That's
low.
crazy though.
But in California,
we were all
the
just doing
unemployment
nothing.
rate has risen to 5.3%, the highest of any U.S. state. The recent tech and AI boom has been good for California, but not for Californians. According to the LA Times, California's homelessness problem,
California is a U.S. capital for homelessness. What will it take to turn that around? Here's another part of where my personal on the ground experience with riding the streets comes in. I was just talking about this with my girlfriend the other day. One big part of like when you experience the homeless situation out here in LA, I put that in air quotes like it's not a thing, but it definitely is a thing. It's just like that's I guess what it's phrased as is that you encounter a lot of people that are living in tents on the street just to survive. And then you have some like, here's one thing you notice if you've ever lived near a place where there's a homeless community is that there will be people trying to survive, right? Those are the ones that you like want to feel bad for. Because they're just trying to survive. They would love to be not in the situation they're in. And besides that, like there's the other side of people who just want to be on the streets who are like, serving drugs and committing crimes and stuff. So it's not like as straightforward as just like sweep the homeless off the street, which is what a lot of people really want to do. It seems like get them in buses and just ship them out to the desert, which is insane. Like that's actually, when you think about it, that is an insane thing to say is let's round up all the homeless people and ship them out to the desert on buses. It's like that is an inhumane thing to say, but it's like actually something a lot of people suggest doing. I also briefly lived near a tiny home community where, I wasn't that close to it, but I was close enough to it to see the kind of the effects it had on the surrounding community, right? Which is basically they take like a bunch of like these little cargo units and they make them into tiny homes. They put them in it looks like a camp, right? It's like they're all kind of together. Then the place is gated and there's security at the front. So you have to check in and check out and they will check your bags, like whatever you have on you if you live in that community, and you won't be able to come in with like certain things. They'll take like if you have paraphernalia, drugs, weapons, They'll take them from you before you can go back into your home. And it was extremely expensive, and they ended up closing it, I believe. They shut it down because it was so expensive to run. When I see stuff like this headline, what will it take to turn that around? Like, there's not an answer for that. I really don't think there is a clear-cut answer for that. And it stretches beyond the micro, like, you know, in between if you live somewhere and then like RVs pop up in your neighborhood, you know, obviously that's gonna be frustrating, but like that will never stop. I don't think it's ever gonna stop. I really don't.
Always been an issue, has grown by 40% over the last 5 years.
That's insane.
And half of all homeless people in the United States live in California.
181,000 Californians are unhoused in 2023, with nearly 70% living on the streets. I want to say maybe a little under half of that is LA alone.
So how is California different from the rest of the United States? How did they go from a $100 billion budget surplus 2 years ago to a budget crisis with a $73 billion deficit today?
What?
And what explains the Californian exodus and lack of new arrival?
Crazy.
Before we get to that, let me tell you about today's video sponsor, Delete Me. Delete Me is
I bought 100 of them, thank you.
Early settlers mistakenly believed that California was an island, entirely separated from the United States by the Gulf of California.
Not
In many
a bad
ways,
idea.
it developed like an island too, with its major population centers all on the coast, as it was cut off from the rest of the United States by huge mountain ranges and hard-to-cross deserts. Before rail and good roads were laid, the easiest route from the east coast to California was by sea. The state's modern economic history began with the gold rush in 1848, which attracted over 300,000 settlers, boosting the population and infrastructure, which led to statehood 2 years later in 1850.
It's actually
The
interesting.
oil industry played a significant role in the state's early economic development too. After oil was discovered in Los Angeles in 1895, California quickly became the biggest oil-producing state up until 1936, after which reserves became depleted. Today, oil and natural gas are mostly imported into California from abroad, which partially explains the state's high energy cost. Agriculture has been a huge industry in the state too, with Californian farmers focusing on the production of the highest margin produce. The film industry is possibly what California has been most famous for around the world, and along with the tech sector, it contributes significantly to California's global cultural influence, which has been huge. The development of Silicon Valley in the late 1970s transformed California into the global leader in technology and innovation, which it remains to this day. Given the size of the state economy, it's no surprise that there's also a vibrant financial sector too. California's public universities are ranked amongst the best in the world for academic excellence, research, and innovation. They attract top-tier faculty and focus on research and development, which has driven advancements in technology, medicine, and the arts. The top Californian universities have policies in place that encourage students to take ownership of their research. Students are often given the opportunity to be named on patents that they developed and are supported by the universities in commercializing their work. The UC system has resources like technology transfer offices and entrepreneurship programs to help students navigate intellectual property rights and develop their research into marketable products or services. At other universities, the ownership of research and IP might be more strictly controlled by the institution itself. Many universities retain ownership of all IP created by students, faculty.
That also stretches to like sports, right? Like if your college sports is notorious for keeping like a tight control over the athletes, right? You can't like take outside sponsorships. They basically own you. And it doesn't surprise me to see that stretches to like academic findings, or like if I bet if like a student discovered something that could be used in business, the university would immediately claim it as their own finding and then probably sell it to a business. Something sketchy as that. Another reason why I hate schools.
Staff. The UC system's policies have fostered a sense of ownership, empowerment, and entrepreneurship among students, and can be given credit for a lot of the innovation and business success that's come out of the state.
Got it.
California is famously America's most left-leaning state, earning it the nickname the People's Republic of California, and making it the whipping boy of conservatives, for whom California has long been shorthand for everything wrong in the country. The state is home to many of America's most...
That's what I was talking about at the beginning, man. People love to hate California. It's just, it's so easy and fun. You know, even don't get us wrong. Anyone who lives out here, we have plenty of things to complain about. It's fun. It is fun to whine and moan about the state of stuff in LA and California. But it's like, I've traveled enough to see where like a lot of people who complain about California who've never been here, what's like there. And it's like, ain't that great there either. I don't know. That's just what I think when I was traveling. I was like, you know, there's just a lot of nothing out here, which is, you know, that's fun. I guess if you're really into nothing.
Progressive policies. It has the heaviest tax load in the country. Criminal justice policies like decarceration, deprosecution, and depolicing. these are all new words to me, have led to a crime problem that has
Depolicing.
damaged the state's image along with residents' feeling of safety. Energy prices, which are high to begin with in California, are likely to only rise higher as the state-mandated transition to a zero-carbon grid takes conventional power offline and replaces it with more expensive green sources. According to research from George Mason University, California is the most regulated state in the United States, with more than 419,000 restrictions in place, the majority of which cover industry, commerce, and development.
Yeah.
This overall combination of high taxes, high regulation, high crime, and an extreme homelessness problem makes California an easy target for right-wing politicians. And as the situation gets worse, outsiders rush to declare it a failed state or announce that the California dream is turning into a nightmare. I should probably use one of those as a video title or something about checking out of the Hotel California. You guys will click on that, hopefully. The cost of housing and energy.
Yeah, I love how they, like, the phrasing of California is a nightmare. Like, dude, right now, like, through the entire winter, it was beautiful. It was sunny almost every single day. Like, the crime thing is crazy. I've lived in real bad neighborhoods, and the crime thing, that's one thing I don't really ever have found is to be as big of a problem as it's ever been quoted. Out of everybody I know, I have to think, like, I don't think I know anybody who's been robbed. You know, I know a decent amount of people. I'm sure if I, like, surveyed everyone I've ever met, like, have you had crime happen to you? I've had crime happen to me. Everyone does. But it kind of does everywhere still. Now, is it disproportionately happening more in LA? Probably, because there's, you know, a huge inequality between incomes, and there's just a ton of people packed into a tiny space. And, you know, some people just end up wanting to do crime, and they're going to go do it. And guess who they're going to do it on? People with a lot of money. Typically, most of the crime that happened to me, as far as like theft, happened when I was at my poorest. Go figure, you know, from who I would assume were other poor people robbing me. So, I mean, there's that. I don't know. I've never had substantial loss as a result of theft or robbery, but I have had my shit jacked before. So, I mean, there's definitely a crime issue in California, but it's hilariously overblown, in my opinion, in comparison to how much you hear about it in the news. It's just not that bad. Obviously, this guy is data driven. He has the points, but firsthand, I go to some pretty bad areas, and, you know, I'm usually fine.
Are so high in California when compared to the rest of the United States that even high incomes look a lot less impressive once adjusted for taxes and the overall higher cost of living.
That's probably
the
true.
price to income ratio for buying homes is 25 times median income in Newport Beach, 19 times median income in Palo Alto, 12 times in San Jose, and 11 times in San
Newport
Francisco.
Beach is crazy, though.
This compares to a national average of 5.6 times for the overall United States, according to researchers from Harvard. According to the Hoover Institution, headquarters migrations out of Santa Clara, Alameda, and San Mateo counties reflect high-tech companies in the digital and social media world opting for less expensive locations, not only to control business costs, but so that they can recruit workers who will benefit from lower housing costs in other states. California's three greatest challenges today are rising unemployment, growing fiscal strains, and population outflows, all of which relate to each other and don't have easy solution. In the United States, overall, the unemployment situation is quite good, with an unemployment rate near its long-term lows and with 1.6 job openings per unemployed person. In California, the situation is a lot worse. Unemployment rose more than in any other state since interest rates were hiked in 2022, and there are just 0.8 job openings per unemployed person.
I kind of hear this one a lot too. I feel like, I mean, I haven't looked for a job in a really long time, but when I do like peruse the internet to see what people are saying about living in LA, it does seem like a pretty big concern. Like, it's hard to find a job in Los Angeles specifically. I don't know about Greater California, but I mean, that just goes into further the fact that it's like there's a lot of people out here, and there's any job you see is going to have immediately a ton of people applying for it. Remember when I was a teenager, I applied to, I want to say like 400 jobs, like not kidding, like 400. The only place that gave me a response back was Target. And I went in for an interview and I didn't get the job. I didn't get the job. So it was at that point right then and there, which is when I started my entrepreneurial journey, and was broke as hell for like 10 years. But fast forward to here, now I'm doing pretty good, or at least okay. Yeah, it probably still is pretty hard to find a job right now, I would imagine.
Ratio in the country.
Do a job search.
Big tech,
for a video.
which had hired aggressively during the zero interest rate environment, began laying off staff a few years ago as soon as they experienced a slowdown. These layoffs affected the overall Californian economy, not just tech, as when laid off tech workers stopped spending, it affected retailers, restaurants, transport, and service workers too. With the slowdown, California's income tax collection fell by 25% last year, a drop equivalent to the decline that happened during the bursting of the dot-com bubble in 2000 and the global financial crisis in 2008. California's state constitution requires a balanced budget in that if proposed spending exceeds estimated revenues, the governor has to recommend the sources to make up the budget shortfall. Governor Newsom projected a deficit of $38 billion for this fiscal year, but the Legislative Analyst's Office, a nonpartisan fiscal advisor for California's legislature, has estimated that the state is on track to spend $73 billion more than it brings in taxes. This is quite an about turn, as just 2 years ago, the state had a $100 billion budget surplus. The reason California's budget fluctuates.
When did this video come out? Yeah, this is 5 months ago, so this is before the fires even happened. So it's probably looking even worse now, honestly.
Wildly, is that California has a very progressive tax structure where higher earners pay a much larger share of taxes.
Yep.
When the state's highest earners do well, the state budget does well, like in 2022. But during business slowdowns, tax revenues dry right up. This volatility in tax collections explains why every few years California has a major fiscal crisis. Governor Newsom defends this setup, saying that it creates a lower tax burden on low and middle income workers. But the problem is that the policies are pro-cyclical, meaning that when the state needs to spend money during a slowdown, it has no money to spend and instead needs to cut back. It's not obvious that cutbacks on government programs that are most relied on by low-income workers during downturns benefits them. Solutions that have been put forth for dealing with the current budget deficit include deferring promised funding for universities, the homeless, and...
like another problem with this is that the money that they do have, it's just anyone who's a resident, specifically LA, it just feels like it's funneled into who knows what. Like there's no clear benefit to the massive amount of taxes that a average citizen pays in LA that is displayed in the city anywhere. There's horrific traffic. Infrastructure feels bad. Most roads still suck. There's barely any apartments available that are affordable to live in. You know, you could kind of go on, but the ultimate thing is that it doesn't matter what tax bracket you're in, no matter what, it feels like the money that you're paying is not reflected in the increase in quality of life that you feel like you should be receiving for what is spent, which is in most people's cases 35 to 40% of their income. And then when you start reaching up to the higher earning levels, it's like basically half your income is just zapped away every year. Even with you know, a lot of things that you could figure out to deduct, the most people that are earning like 400,000 or 500,000 plus are running businesses, so they have like probably a lengthy list of deductions. They'll probably, you know, have themselves set up as an S corp if they're a small business, so they pay themselves a salary, so they still get the QBI deduction. And you know, it's still no matter how you cut it, you're paying a lot if you are a resident of California, LA specifically, and you pay taxes. Doesn't matter where you are on the totem pole of earning, paying a lot. City still sucks, feels like. So totally justified.
Disabled. In prior budget crises, Californian politicians have played games like pushing payments out an extra day so that they come out of next year's budget, or paying IOUs to businesses, students, and taxpayers to whom it owed money. None of this fixes the core problem. The LA Times writes that despite what people believe, overspending is only a small part of California's problem. They say that the state's fiscal headache is largely the result of an unstable tax system that relies too heavily on the rich. For decades, California's revenues have been heavily dependent on capital gains taxes on the richest residents. Thus, revenues spike in years when the stock market booms, as a lot of IPOs occur, and investors sell stocks and other assets. For example, Facebook's IPO in 2012 brought in an extra $1.3 billion in state taxes. The problem is that in years with an IPO drought, insufficient taxes are collected to keep government programs running. As an example, in 2021, the top 0.1% of Californians paid almost 30% of all state income tax.
Oh my God!
The problem with relying on such a small number of people for such a large percentage of state taxes is that if they choose to leave the state, the tax revenue dries right up. A famous example of over-reliance on top earners was in 2016, when New Jersey's wealthiest resident moved to Florida, throwing the New Jersey state budget into chaos as hundreds of millions of...
You would think that in these situations that the states would like do things to keep these people in the state. I'm assuming at this point there's like tons of like little micro politics at play that's like, you know, you have personal enemies in positions of power at that point, which are like, no, we're not going to do anything to help that guy. Let him go. And then he actually leaves. You're like, oh, we got a problem on our hands now.
Expected revenues evaporate.
Like, what's going on here?
This is already...
It's like they're basically relying on the fact that LA and California has good weather. It's like, all right, we got good weather. We're going to do all these other things that suck, but like just stay because the weather's great, right? Like, please just stay. We got sunshine, beaches. Don't leave. Don't leave. Please don't leave. Oh, we're going to double your taxes, but it's like the sun, right? It's not raining. Don't leave.
Already a problem in California. The state has been losing a growing number of high-earning residents, with the trend picking up pace during the pandemic. In 2021, according to The Economist, the state lost almost $30 billion in net taxpayer income to other states as wealthy taxpayers relocated. California was not always set up like this. In the 1950s, income tax made up only 10% of California's general fund, and sales tax, which is much more stable, was the main revenue source. Since then, California has become much more of a services-based economy and is one of the few states that doesn't tax services. Tim Hartford wrote an article this week on some of the strange taxes that have been introduced throughout history.
Taxes.
Like Peter the Great's beard tax, whose aim was to encourage Russian nobles to shave, or Argentina's bachelor tax, which brought about a new profession, the lady rejecter, where women would charge men a fee to write a letter stating that the man had proposed marriage to her and that she had declined the offer.
What the fuck?
fact that the man had tried but failed made him exempt from the tax. Hartford, who was writing about the UK and not California, argued that it often works better when a government needs to raise revenue to broaden the tax base while lowering the tax rate at the same time, rather than to single out small groups to tax. This is possibly more the case for a state than a country, as it's easier to move to a neighboring state in the United States than it is to move to another country. The Economist points out that there's nothing new about more Americans leaving California than move there. They say that this has been going on for over 30 years, but they point out that something else has changed. California's population still grew over that period because of foreign immigrants arriving there to work. A slowdown in immigration to California from abroad that started during the pandemic has sustained, and California has now seen an outright decline in its population for 3 straight years, the first sustained drop since becoming a state in 1850. California's reliance on capital gains taxes limits the state's flexibility to fix its budget crisis, as hiking taxes further could just drive more rich Californians to leave, exacerbating the problem. According to the WHO,
another thing is, I feel like you think of a rich California, you think of like a millionaire, right? You think of someone who's making like over $1 million. This is probably affecting people that are barely or just shy or even just over the 6-figure mark. Like people who aren't like truly, like they don't really desire to stay in California for any particular reason. Like maybe their family's not even here. They don't care about the weather that much. Like they're going to leave. You know, they probably don't really have much initiative to stay once, you know, a 6-figure income gets cut in half. Like they're like, I could just go to Florida and suddenly I have 15% more money, something like that. Or do it in Texas, you know, and suddenly I got more money. And obviously, if you go buy a home in Texas, there's increased taxes in other ways, like property tax, which I think if you do the calculations of like buying a home here or there, you're probably still making out better in Texas, but it's not quite as clear cut as it seems, I think. Those people are going to leave. So you think of like it's all like millionaires and multimillionaires leaving. I think it's people who make much less than that, but more in comparison to the broad amount of people who live in LA or California, you know, I guess where the median income is still around like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. For a lot of people, that doesn't seem like a lot of money, but that's what people are making.
For Institute, California has hit a wall where the state can't bring in any more tax revenue without significantly damaging the economy. California's state income tax rate is amongst the steepest for wealthy people in the United States, topping out at 13.3% for millionaires, and its gasoline tax of almost 60 cents per gallon is the nation's highest. While California's taxes are very progressive, hitting the wealthiest the hardest, the Public Policy Institute of California reports that 70% of Californians still feel that they are paying more than they should in state and local taxes. Most taxpayers weigh up what they get in terms of public services for their tax money, and with high crime and extreme levels of homelessness, many Californians don't feel that they get additional public services that are not available in low-tax states. They simply feel that they're not getting value for their money.
I personally 100% agree with that. I do not think that I feel safe on public transit. And I am a dude who I feel like I can very easily and capably defend myself. I'm always at least armed at some point when I go outside. And I just hate the train, and I just can't, I don't enjoy it at all. It's bad. It's bad. It's a bad experience. In every single way, it's bad. It smells bad. It's cramped. Even when it's empty, there's at least a few people in there. You just looking at them and you're like, I know you want to try something. Like, I know you, I can see it in your eye. Anyone who's like, you ever been around someone, you feel the energy that they like, or they're about to do something crazy. Like something's about to happen. They want to attack someone, they want to try and rob someone. You feel that all the time on the metro in LA. The bus, forget about it. I took the bus all the time when I was a kid. I just had to. I had no other way to get around. Parents were always busy, no one to drive me. If it was too far to ride to the bike too, I would be taking the bus. So I had plenty of experience with the bus. Bus is horrifying. It is a horrifying experience. I took a bus one time in my adult life, probably in the last like 10 years, and it was just as bad as I remember it. Cramped, smelly, dangerous. That's just transit. I mean, there's plenty of other examples I could say to back this guy's point up of that. It's 100% true. Not getting the value of the money. That goes back to the infrastructure and all the other things I was talking about a minute ago.
The one area where the state's tax collections are lower than in other states is property tax. Proposition 13, which was adopted by California voters in 1978, requires that properties be assessed at market value at the time of their sale. And after that, assessments can't rise by more than 2% per year until the house is sold again. This means that in a situation where property values increase by more than 2% per year, which they have in California, homeowners are incentivized to stay in their original home rather than move, as their taxes are lower than they would be in a different house of the exact same value.
And this problem is a whole nother issue because it just reduces the amount of houses on the market to the point where anything that is available, you get like these just horrendous, disgusting, completely destroyed houses. Like there's like every single thing needs to be fixed. If you brought someone for an inspection, they'd just probably start laughing, when they walk in like, wow, yeah, well, you got to replace literally everything in here. You might as well just tear it down. And it'll be like $800,000. It's impossible. The real estate market is completely cooked, and it's because of that. That is a main reason I think a lot of people believe housing market in LA is so competitive, is because there's so many people that have been in their house since like the 60s and 70s, and they are not leaving. Not leaving. I believe in an inheritance, I don't know if you pay a new property tax or if you pay the one that was originally loaded with the property when it was bought new, and you get that super low rate still. That one I actually don't know about. Maybe someone in the comments knows, but I mean, if it is, then that's an even like you just not going to sell your house ever. You just let your son or daughter buy it or have it, and then they paid like next to nothing on property taxes either, which, I mean, that makes sense, but it's just less houses available for anyone else to buy.
This distorts the Californian real estate market, and the data shows that Californians tend to move house a lot less than Americans in other states. This rule benefits wealthier, older residents at the expense of new home buyers. People who have left California cite high taxes, expensive real estate, crime, homelessness, and overregulation as the reasons they decided to move to other states. So how bad is this?
So let's break that down a little bit. Taxes, for sure. Expensive real estate, yeah. Expensive real estate and overregulation, I think those are the two that, like, these are separate parties that are complaining about these things. The person who's complaining about overregulation is probably wealthier, probably cares a little bit less about the expense of real estate. They probably own a home where they're able to maneuver themselves around easily. If they're worried about overregulation, that's more like a company thing or just a wealthy individual thing. Crime, sure, I guess like you're going to deal with crime anywhere. Obviously, if you live in like a remote place, it's probably less. And homelessness, of course, it's like at one, I feel like it doesn't affect people as directly as much as a lot of people think. I'm gonna say it. A lot of people just don't like seeing it. They don't like seeing it in their neighborhood. They don't like seeing it in downtown. They don't like seeing it anywhere. Like they see it and they get like visibly disgusted. That just is what it is. Like some people are like that. And it's enough for some people to get them to completely leave.
And overregulation as the reasons they decided to move to other states. So how bad is the regulatory environment in California? We saw earlier that California has the most regulation of any state in the US by a significant margin. But the same report showed that Texas, a state that people are leaving California for, is number 5 on that list, which doesn't seem a whole lot better. According to the Pacific Research Institute, California doesn't just have more regulations than other states, but the regulations themselves are more restrictive than in other states too. The report argues that California's regulatory environment is particularly difficult for small businesses that lack the scale to efficiently manage the administrative burdens and finance the higher costs created by onerous regulation. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a big reason for the migrations we've seen from states like New York and California to states like Florida and Texas is that the pandemic weakened the economic clusters that dominated pre-pandemic America. Pre-pandemic, 19% of all tech jobs were based in California. Today, only 16.5% are. It's not just tech jobs that are moving out of state either. According to the LA Times, film and TV workers are leaving too. During the pandemic, when work could be done remotely, people moved to more affordable locations. This happened right as the tech industry was booming, which just meant that California had a smaller slice of a growing pie. Everything seemed fine. Once the tech recession occurred, as interest rates rose, California was just losing outright, with a smaller slice of a smaller pie. Technology stocks today make up just under 1/3 of the value of the S&P 500 index. If you add in communication services stocks, many of which connect with the technology arena, the group represents more than 40% of the overall stock market. On top of this, there are lots of huge privately owned tech firms too. The growth of the tech sector has been a huge contributor to Californian growth over the last 60 years, but people are starting to question if these companies can continue to grow from their already massive size going forward. The tech sector is well suited to California, as it relies on small numbers of highly paid workers to design products or software that are really scalable. Unfortunately for the state, you wouldn't really manufacture physical products there due to the expense of real estate. High regulation, and high taxes. There's a reason that every Apple product says designed in California, made in China, and taxed in Ireland on the back of it. If the tech industry stops growing, the state might struggle. Tech layoffs have been hitting California quite hard over the last 2 years. I made a whole video about this a few months ago. And while Californian tech workers receive the highest average tech pay of any US state, they have not only been hit the hardest with layoffs, but also withstood the largest year-over-year pay drop when they find new jobs, as demand for their skills has dried up.
Damn.
Since the gold rush, California's economy has been built on ready access to fresh water. The state's agriculture sector faces significant water challenges today due to prolonged droughts and over-reliance on groundwater. California's water reservoirs are often well below average capacity today, leading to stringent water use restrictions. This puts a lot of strain on the agricultural sector, which is vital to California's economy. And once again, there's no obvious solution to this problem. California clearly faces a number of challenges, and its economy today is suffering in ways that the overall US economy is not. But California has had rough patches in the past, like in the early 2000s and in the wake of the credit crunch, but its innovation-led growth model has managed to stand the test of time. The state made up 14% of America's total output last year, up from 12.5% in the late 1990s. There's no need to count the state out yet.
That is all like
the biggest
Silicon Valley,
problems appear to be unaffordable housing, excess regulation, and a pro-cyclical tax system that finds itself in crisis every few years. The unaffordable housing problem is driven by a combination of excessive regulation and NIMBYism, which combined make California the most difficult part of the United States to build new housing in. Fixing this problem would likely fix a lot of California's other problems. It's worth noting that the states that people have been moving to, the ones experiencing the fastest growth, are also the states with affordable housing where it's easy to build. Workers simply like living in places where they can afford a comfortable home, and employers like hiring in these places as workers with affordable homes are willing to accept lower pay. You don't really benefit from high pay if it all goes out the door in housing costs. So can all of California's problems just be blamed on progressivism?
Yes.
After all, Californian refugees have been moving to states where there are no state income taxes, to states with a lower regulation where it's easier to build, or to places where crime rates are lower than in the Golden State. Janan Ganesh made an interesting point in a recent FT article on the balance between the right and left, arguing that the governing climate in which urban life flourishes is a blend of progressive ideas such as liberal immigration rules and infrastructure spending with conservative ideas like market incentives and toughness on crime. He argues that while cities might benefit most from low taxes, less burdensome regulation, and a business-friendly atmosphere, they often vote for policies that would harm them. California has been a hugely successful economy because of its ability to attract the best and brightest. And if these people are starting to move away for greener pastures, it might be worthwhile mimicking some of the qualities of the states that are attracting them away. If you found this video interesting, you should watch my video on what's driving.
That was a banger, man. I actually learned a ton from that video. Point in case, California's gonna be fine. Yeah, everything's gonna be fine. No one's gonna leave. The second someone leaves, people are gonna come and take their place, and everything's gonna be fine. Does it suck right now? I would say it's been worse, but it could definitely be better. Great video. This guy's real smart.